My parents gave my brother their $1.50 million San Diego house, while I got Grandpa Henry's worthless 50-acre farm in rural Tennessee that hadn't grown crops in 25 years. My wife left me, calling me a broke farmer. Desperate, I drove to sell the land. But when the surveyor showed me his report, I couldn't believe what was buried underneath.
My brother Michael was handed our parents' $1.5 million home in San Diego Keys, and all while I was told my inheritance was Grandpa Henry's 50-acre farm in rural Tennessee. That farm hadn't grown a single crop in 25 years. The house was modern, sitting in a prime neighborhood worth more than most people make in a lifetime. The farm was nothing but cracked soil, rotting fences, and a barn ready to collapse. I'll never forget how my wife Emily reacted. She stared at the deed in my hand like it was a death sentence. She said, "Daniel, I married a man with dreams, not a broke farmer with a worthless piece of land." Then she packed her bags and walked out the door. Watching her leave hurt more than losing the house ever could. I felt stripped of everything. My family's respect, my marriage, and even my dignity. I thought the only way forward was to drive down to Tennessee and sell the land for whatever I could get. I just wanted to walk away and never think about it again. But when I met the land surveyor and saw his report, my entire life flipped upside down. What he told me was buried beneath that soil didn't just change my future. It changed everything I thought I knew about my family, about Grandpa, and about myself. I grew up in a house where love was measured in the way my parents looked at my brother Michael. He was the golden boy from the start. Michael had the charm, the grades, the ambition, and the approval. He was the kind of son parents boasted about at dinner parties. Whenever Michael walked into a room, Mom and Dad lit up like he had just cured cancer. When I walked in, I was greeted with a polite smile or a reminder to do better. I was the responsible one, the one who held things together in silence, but I was never the one who made them proud. That difference followed us into adulthood. Michael became a successful financial consultant in San Diego. He wore sharp suits, drove a polished black BMW, and had clients who shook his hand like he was royalty. I took a different path. I worked in construction and contracting, moving from job to job, paying my bills and trying to build something steady for myself and my wife Emily. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I thought it was enough until I saw how my parents treated me compared to Michael. The day they announced their decision about the inheritance, the truth of that difference hit me harder than ever. We were all sitting in the living room of their San Diego house. Michael was on the edge of his seat with that confident grin he always wore when he expected something good. I sat back in the corner of the couch, trying to brace myself. My parents had been hinting for months that they were making arrangements for the future, but they never said what that meant. Dad cleared his throat and said, "We've made our decision. Michael, this house will be yours. We want you to raise your family here. Keep it in the Daniel name." He handed Michael a folder with the deed, and Michael's face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. Mom hugged him, her voice thick with pride. "You'll make this place even better. I know you will." I sat there waiting for my turn for some kind of acknowledgement that I mattered too. Dad turned toward me, pulled another folder from the table, and slid it across. "Daniel, you'll inherit Grandpa Henry's 50-acre farm in Tennessee. It's not much, but it's something solid. He always wanted you to have it." I opened the folder, and all I saw was a black and white deed to a property I hadn't set foot on in decades. That farm had been abandoned for years. No crops, no animals, just dust and decay. Grandpa Henry had been a proud man, but his pride didn't keep the land from withering away. I felt my stomach drop as Michael clutched his folder with a grin, already daydreaming about renovating the house and celebrating with his friends. I tried to keep my face calm, but inside I was boiling. It wasn't jealousy over the money or the house. It was the message. My parents had given Michael the symbol of success and stability, while they gave me something that felt like a burden, a joke, an afterthought. When we got home that evening, Emily didn't even try to hide her disappointment. She dropped her purse on the counter and stared at me. "Are you serious, Daniel? Your brother gets a mansion in San Diego, and we're supposed to celebrate inheriting a dead farm in the middle of nowhere." I tried to calm her. "It's land. We can sell it. Maybe it's worth something." She shook her head. "Worth something. It hasn't produced anything in 25 years. It's worthless. Do you expect me to start living as a farmer's wife in Tennessee? This isn't what I signed up for." Her voice cracked with anger, and for the first time I saw in her eyes not love but contempt. I stood there in silence, gripping the folder in my hands, wishing I had a better answer. I wanted to believe I could turn this into an opportunity, but deep down I felt humiliated. My parents had just told me I was second best, and now my wife was reminding me that she agreed. The days that followed were heavy. Emily grew colder, quieter, until one morning she announced she was leaving. She packed her clothes in a single suitcase, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I can't spend my life tied to a man who has nothing. You're a good man, Daniel, but good doesn't pay the bills. I can't do this anymore." Then she walked out. I sat on the couch that night with the farm deed spread out on the coffee table. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of my failures. My brother had wealth and approval. My wife had left, and I had 50 acres of forgotten dirt that mocked me every time I looked at it. I couldn't sleep, so I drove around the city in my truck, the neon lights of San Diego blurring past me. Every corner reminded me of the life I didn't have. The house Michael inherited was only a few miles away, shining with opportunity, while my future lay hundreds of miles across the country in Tennessee. I told myself I would not let this land defeat me. If it was worthless, I would sell it and move on. If it had even a little value, I would take whatever I could get and start over. I wasn't going to be chained to my parents' favoritism or my wife's judgment. I wanted freedom, even if it came from selling off the last piece of my family's legacy. That night, I made up my mind. I was going to Tennessee. The morning after Emily left, I woke up to silence that felt like it was pressing down on my chest. Her side of the bed was empty, the closet half bare, and the apartment looked like someone had taken a blade and sliced my life in two. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared at the farm deed spread across the kitchen table. It was the only thing I had left, and it felt like a cruel joke. Michael was probably walking through the halls of the San Diego house with our parents smiling at him while I sat alone with nothing but a piece of paper tied to dirt I had no use for. I drove to work that morning, but my head wasn't in it. The sounds of hammers and saws didn't drown out the voices in my mind. Emily's words, my parents' quiet dismissal, and Michael's smug smile played over and over until I thought I'd go insane. By noon, I couldn't focus anymore. I stepped outside, sat in my truck, and called a land agent in Tennessee whose number I found online. His name was Jack Coleman, and he sounded like he had been selling farmland his entire life. 50 acres in Jefferson County, I told him. I just want it gone. He asked a few questions about the location, the condition, the history. I answered as best I could, though I hadn't seen the place in years. Finally, he sighed and said, "Well, son, if you're looking to unload it fast, you're not going to get much. Maybe $7,000 if somebody wants it for hunting land. Crops won't grow there anymore. The soil's been dead for decades." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. $7,000 for 50 acres. That's the reality, Jack said. But if you're serious, I can connect you with the surveyor to get a proper report. You'll need that before you list it anyway. I hung up and sat in silence. $7,000. Michael had been given a home worth over $1.5 million while I was holding on to something barely worth the price of a used car. The weight of that truth crushed me. I hit the steering wheel so hard my knuckles bled. That night I packed a small bag. I couldn't sit in San Diego any longer, surrounded by reminders of everything I had lost. The decision was simple. I would drive to Tennessee, meet the surveyor, get the land assessed, and sell it for whatever I could. Even if it was pennies, it would be better than staring at that deed and feeling worthless. The drive was long and lonely. Mile after mile of highway gave me too much time to think. I thought about Grandpa Henry, the man whose name was on the deed before mine. He was a stubborn old farmer who loved the land more than anything. He used to say, "This soil has history, Daniel. You just have to respect it." I never understood what he meant. To me, that farm was where I spent hot summers sweating under the sun, pulling weeds and listening to embark orders. When I turned 18, I left and never looked back. As I drove east, I wondered if this was his final punishment for me. He had chosen me to inherit the farm, not Michael, but it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a weight he had strapped to my shoulders, a reminder of the years I had resented him. My parents framed it as though Grandpa wanted me to have it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more of a curse than a blessing. I stopped at a cheap motel along the way, lying on stiff mattresses, staring at ceilings, thinking of Emily. I replayed the last words she said before she walked out. I didn't marry a broke farmer. Those words cut deeper than she realized. I wasn't even a farmer. I was less than that. I was a man with land that couldn't grow a man whose worth was measured in failure. When I finally crossed into Tennessee, the air felt different. The highways narrowed into winding country roads, the trees taller, the towns smaller. I rolled down the window and let the cool wind hit my face. It smelled like grass, mud, and woods. It smelled like the past. My stomach churned as I followed the directions to the farm. The moment I pulled onto the gravel drive, my heart sank. The place was worse than I remembered. The farmhouse leaned on its foundation, the windows broken, the paint stripped by years of rain and sun. The barn's roof sagged, holes punched through it like the sky itself had given up on keeping it whole. The fields stretched out, nothing but weeds and cracked dirt where crops once grew. Fences leaned sideways, swallowed by vines. I stepped out of the truck and stood in the silence. No neighbors in sight, no sounds of tractors or animals, just the whisper of the wind through the empty fields. I wanted to scream, to demand an answer from the sky as to why this was my life. Instead, I lit a cigarette even though I hadn't smoked in years and stared at the land I was supposed to call mine. The next morning, I met Larry Thompson, the land surveyor Jack had recommended. He pulled up in an old pickup, his toolbox rattling in the back. He was a man in his 50s, weathered straightforward, the kind of guy who had seen land like this 100 times before. He shook my hand firmly and looked me in the eye. "You're Daniel, grandson of Grandpa Henry. I remember your granddad. Hard man, but he loved this land. He wouldn't sell it no matter who asked." I nodded, uncomfortable with the memory. "Well, I'm not him. I just need to know what it's worth. I want to sell it as fast as possible." Larry studied me for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "We'll see what you've got here." He grabbed his gear and walked toward the fields. I followed, my boots crunching on dry dirt. As I watched him set up his equipment, I felt the anger boiling again. This was it. This was what my life had come to. Waiting for a stranger to tell me that my inheritance, my marriage, my entire sense of worth was tied to land that no one wanted. But deep down, a small part of me wondered why Grandpa Henry had refused every offer to sell. Why had he guarded this land so fiercely when it looked like nothing more than wasted space? I didn't know it then, but the answer to that question was about to change everything. The first morning on the farm, I woke up to the sound of birds outside the broken window of the farmhouse. The bed creaked under my weight, the floor sagged, and every surface was coated in dust. I sat up, rubbing my face, and stared at the deed on the nightstand. It looked like nothing more than paper, yet it carried the full weight of my failures. I thought about Emily. I thought about Michael, probably sipping his morning coffee in a luxury kitchen while my parents admired the way he ran the family home. I thought about Grandpa Henry, who had insisted this farm meant something. I could not see it. All I saw was an empty field and a broken legacy. Larry Thompson arrived just after sunrise. His old truck rumbled into the driveway, tires crunching on gravel. He stepped out with a clipboard tucked under his arm and a measuring device in hand. "Morning, Daniel," he said, his voice calm, steady. "We'll start with the boundaries, then run some soil tests." I followed him as he walked the property, marking points, jotting notes, driving stakes into the ground. The silence between us was heavy, broken only by the sound of his boots in the dirt and the occasional click of his instruments. I kept my distance, my hands shoved in my pockets, feeling like an outsider on land that technically belonged to me. Hours passed. Larry moved across the fields, stopped near the tree line, studied the ground, then moved on. He looked serious, focused, and I grew more anxious with every step he took. Finally, he turned toward me and said, "Soil samples first. This will tell us if the ground has anything left in it or if it's truly dead." I nodded, trying to sound casual. "I just need to know if it's worth selling. If it's not, I'll take whatever I can get." He looked at me for a long moment. "Your granddad never saw it that way. He turned down more offers than I can count. People came from out of state trying to buy this land. He always said no." "Why?" I asked, frustration bubbling in my chest. "Why would he hold on to a farm that couldn't produce?" Larry shrugged. "Some men believe in the value of land beyond what you see on the surface. Henry was one of them. He never explained himself, but he sure as hell wasn't letting this place go." That answer didn't calm me. It only made me more restless. I thought of Grandpa Henry's hard stare, the way he'd talk about legacy while I wiped sweat off my face in the summer heat. Back then, I thought he was stubborn to the point of madness. Now I wondered if I had misunderstood something. The rest of the day was spent walking the property line and watching Larry dig into the earth, sealing samples in bags, labeling them with neat handwriting. When he finally packed up his tools, he said, "I'll run these tests and check the records. I'll have a full report in a couple of days. Then you'll know what you're sitting on." I nodded, though my stomach twisted. 2 more days of waiting. 2 more nights alone in a farmhouse that creaked with every gust of wind. That night, I lit a small fire in the old fireplace, sat in the rocking chair, and stared into the flames. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Michael. For a moment I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity won. I answered. "Daniel," he said smoothly, "I heard you went out to Tennessee, trying to play farmer now." His laugh was sharp-cutting. "I'm not playing anything," I said quietly. "Well, when you realize that land is worthless, you can always come crash here. Maybe I'll let you take the guest room. Mom and Dad are already talking about how much I've done with the house. You know they never really expected much from you." I clenched my fist around the phone. "Good night, Michael." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. His words burned in my chest. They confirmed what I'd always known. To my parents, I was the extra, the one who never quite made it. To Emily, I was a failed provider. To Michael, I was nothing more than a shadow. That night, I made myself a promise. I was going to see this through. I was going to wait for Larry's report, and no matter what it said, I was not going to crawl back to San Diego with my head bowed. This land might be worthless, but it was mine. If selling it gave me even a fraction of a chance to rebuild my life, I would take it. If it was truly worthless, then I would still walk away with my dignity intact, knowing I had faced it head-on instead of running. The next day, I drove into town to clear my head. The small community of Jefferson County was nothing like San Diego. Main Street had a diner, a hardware store, a post office, and a few small shops. Everyone seemed to know each other. When I walked into the diner, conversations paused. A man at the counter nodded. "You're Henry's grandson, aren't you?" I nodded, unsure how to respond. "He was a tough old man," the waitress said as she poured my coffee. "Never sold a thing even when folks tried real hard, said the land had secrets worth protecting." Her words hit me like a stone. Secrets worth protecting. I sipped my coffee, staring out the window, my thoughts spinning. Grandpa Henry had been guarding something all along. What if I had been wrong about him? What if the land wasn't a curse, but something else entirely? That thought stayed with me as I drove back to the farmhouse. The old fences, the crumbling barn, the silent fields, they all looked the same, but I looked at them differently now. For the first time, I wondered if there was more to this inheritance than just failure. 2 days later, Larry returned with his report in hand, his expression unreadable. I felt my chest tighten as he stepped out of the truck. The moment had arrived. Larry stepped out of his truck holding a thick folder, the kind that carried either salvation or a death sentence. He walked toward me slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel drive, his face unreadable. My stomach twisted into knots. This was the moment that would define everything. Either I would walk away with nothing but a bitter story to tell, or I would find a reason to believe that Grandpa Henry had not cursed me after all. "Morning, Daniel," Larry said calmly. He held the folder out, but did not let go until he looked me in the eye. "I think you're going to want to sit down before you read this." I swallowed hard and motioned toward the porch. We sat across from each other, the silence heavy, the sound of wind rattling the loose shutters. Larry opened the folder and slid a page across the table. On it were numbers charts and maps that I struggled to make sense of. "What am I looking at?" I asked. Larry leaned forward, tapping the page with his finger. "What you've got under this farm isn't worthless soil. It's one of the richest deposits of rare earth minerals I've ever seen in this part of the country. The kind of material used in everything from smartphones to electric cars. This land isn't dead, Daniel. It's a gold mine." The words hit me so hard I almost laughed, but my throat tightened instead. "You're telling me this land, the one everyone said was worthless, is worth something?" Larry nodded firmly. "Not just something a lot. I had to double-check the tests because I didn't believe it at first. The veins run deep. Whoever controls this land controls a fortune. I've seen companies fight tooth and nail for deposits half this size." I sat back in the chair, my heart pounding. My mind flashed to Emily's angry face, to my parents' quiet dismissal, to Michael's smug voice on the phone. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment I felt like I was less than nothing came rushing back. I had been sitting on a treasure the whole time, and no one had known. Except maybe Grandpa Henry. "Grandpa knew," I whispered. Larry tilted his head. "What's that?" "My grandfather," I said louder, my voice steady now. "He must have known. That's why he never sold it. That's why he turned down every offer. He wasn't just being stubborn, he was protecting it. Protecting me." Larry gave a small smile. "Sounds like Henry to me. He wasn't the kind of man to explain himself, but he knew the value of things. Maybe he saw something in you that no one else did." The weight of those words sank deep. My entire life I had believed I was the forgotten son, the disappointment, the one who never measured up. But Grandpa Henry had chosen me for a reason. He had left me something bigger than money. He had left me a chance to prove my worth. I stood and walked to the edge of the porch, staring out at the fields that suddenly looked different. The weeds and broken fences no longer mocked me. They were just a disguise, a mask hiding the truth beneath the surface. What I had thought was a curse was actually a blessing so large I could barely comprehend it. The thought of Emily came back again. I pictured her face when she told me she could not be married to a broke farmer. The irony stung, but instead of pain, I felt a wave of relief. She had walked away before the truth was revealed. She had chosen Michael's world of appearances over mine. Now she would have to live with that choice. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my mother. I hesitated, then answered. "Daniel," she said breathlessly, "we just heard from Michael that you had the farm surveyed. What did they find?" I looked at Larry, who gave me a nod as if to say this was my moment. I took a deep breath. "They found out it's worth more than you could imagine. Grandpa Henry left me something you'll never understand. He left me a future." There was silence on the line. Then my father's voice cut in sharp and incredulous. "Are you saying that land has value? More than your house in San Diego," I said evenly. "More than Michael's shiny career. He gave me something you both thought was worthless, and it turns out it's the greatest gift I could have received." I ended the call before they could respond. My hand shook, but not from fear. For the first time in my life, I felt power. Larry closed the folder and stood. "What you do next is up to you. Companies will line up with offers once this gets out. But you've got time. Don't rush. Think about what you want, not what anyone else expects." I nodded, my chest swelling with something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Real pride. Not the kind that came from someone else's approval, but the kind that came from knowing the truth. That night I walked the fields under the stars. The air was cool, the sky stretched wide above me, and the land beneath my feet hummed with possibility. For the first time since Emily left, since my parents dismissed me, since Michael laughed at me, I did not feel broken. I felt chosen. Grandpa Henry had trusted me with this. He had seen something I could not see in myself, and now I knew this farm was not a burden. It was a legacy, and it was mine to carry forward. The night after Larry revealed the truth, I barely slept. I lay awake in the farmhouse, the roof groaning and the wind, the smell of old wood and dust filling the air. But for the first time in years, I did not feel like I was drowning. Instead, I felt like I had been pulled to the surface and given air. Every memory of being dismissed, every wound from Emily and my parents, every smug smile from Michael, they all began to fade under the weight of what I now knew. The land beneath me was not worthless. It was powerful, and for once in my life, I was not the forgotten son. The next morning, I walked the property with new eyes. The weeds no longer seemed like an insult. The broken fences no longer mocked me. The silence no longer felt empty. I realized I was standing on ground that held a future larger than anything my family could imagine. Grandpa Henry had left this to me, not Michael, not my parents, not anyone else. He had chosen me. That truth sank into my bones and changed the way I carried myself. It did not take long before word spread. Small towns have a way of moving news faster than the internet. People stopped me on Main Street asking if it was true. Some congratulated me. Others looked at me with envy, and a few offered backhanded comments that I ignored. It felt strange being noticed for something more than being Michael's brother. A week later, my phone lit up with Michael's name again. This time, I answered. "Daniel," he said quickly, his voice suddenly sweet. "Mom and Dad told me about the minerals. That's incredible. Listen, maybe we could work together. I know the right people, the right companies. I can help you handle this. We're brothers." After all, I almost laughed. For years, Michael had been the one on top, the one with the keys, the success, the spotlight. Now he was scrambling to grab hold of something that was never his. "No, Michael," I said firmly. "This is mine. Grandpa Henry left it to me for a reason. I'll figure it out without you." He tried to protest, but I ended the call. I felt no guilt. For once, I did not need his approval. I did not need my parents' approval. I had something greater. My mother called the next day. Her tone was softer, almost pleading. "Daniel, maybe we were too hard on you. We should have seen your potential. Your father and I would like to come visit to talk about the future." I closed my eyes and let her words wash over me. For years I had dreamed of hearing them admit they had underestimated me. Yet now that the moment had come, I did not feel the triumph I expected. Instead, I felt a calm distance. I no longer needed their recognition to validate who I was. "I appreciate that," I told her. "But the future I build here will be mine, not yours to control. Grandpa Henry trusted me, and I plan to honor that. There was a pause, then a sigh. We only want what's best for you. I know, I said, but what's best for me isn't what you ever imagined. I ended the call with no anger in my chest, just clarity. Emily reached out not long after. She sent a message first, then called when I did not respond. When I finally answered, her voice trembled. Daniel, I heard about the land. I was wrong. I should never have left. We can still fix this. I want to come back for a moment. I remembered the nights we had spent dreaming together, the laughter we once shared, the love I thought was unbreakable. But I also remembered her words sharp as knives when she called me a broke farmer and walked away. She had left when things looked bleak, and now she wanted to return only because fortune had shifted. No, Emily, I said, my voice steady. You left when you thought I had nothing. You don't get to return now that I have everything. My life is moving forward without you. She cried, begged, but I stood firm. When the call ended, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I realized that sometimes losing people is not a curse. Sometimes it clears the space for you to find yourself. Weeks turned into months, and offers began arriving from companies eager to mine the land. I took Larry's advice and did not rush. I hired an attorney, researched my options, and made sure I understood exactly what I was holding. For once, I was making choices on my own terms, not reacting to someone else's expectations. As I walked the fields one evening, the sun setting in shades of orange and gold, I thought of Grandpa Henry. I remembered his rough hands, his stern voice, his insistence that this land mattered. As a boy, I thought he was cruel, forcing me to work under the hot sun. As a man, I finally understood he was not punishing me. He was preparing me. He had seen beyond the weeds and broken fences. He had seen a legacy worth fighting for, and he had trusted me to carry it forward. The lesson was clear. Value is not always obvious. Worth is not always measured in money or status. Sometimes the greatest gifts look like burdens until the truth is revealed. My parents had given Michael a house, a symbol of success. They gave me what they thought was nothing. But that nothing became everything. I no longer cared about the house in San Diego. I no longer envied Michael's life. I no longer sought my parents' approval or Emily's love. What I had was more powerful than any of that. I had a future built on strength, resilience, and the quiet faith of a man who believed in me when no one else did. As the last light faded across the fields, I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa Henry. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. That farm in Tennessee taught me something I'll never forget. Life doesn't always hand you what looks like treasure. Sometimes it hands you what looks like nothing, and it's up to you to discover the value buried beneath. I spent years believing I was second best forgotten, left behind. But in the end, what seemed worthless turned out to be worth more than anything my family could have given me. If this story connected with you, if you felt the weight of disappointment, betrayal, or being overlooked, I hope you also felt the power of finding your own worth. Thank you for following my story. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that life's blessings can be disguised as burdens. Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done if you were in my shoes. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. Your support means the world, and it keeps me.
After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. **